This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.
It's St. Paul, Minnesota, won't you stand next to me? Show me all your fancies, tell me what there is to see.
And welcome to a brand new radio program. This is So St. Paul, and this show will air every Thursday from 5 to 5:30 p.m., and it's about, you guessed it, our great city of St. Paul. I am your host, Katie DeSelf, and today in the studio we have a very special guest, Councilwoman Rebecca Noecker from Ward 2. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
It's great to have you here. Councilwoman Noecker is a native of St. Louis Park. She earned a bachelor's degree in social studies from Harvard, and she has devoted the early years of her career to educational equity, serving as a middle school science teacher with Teach for America in Baton Rouge, a program officer at both the Baton Rouge Area Foundation and Teach for India, and as a director of community engagement at Achieve Minneapolis. That is a very impressive resume, but there's more. She's also actively been involved in her community, serving on the board of the Westside Community Organization and the St. Paul Planning Commission. Additionally, she founded Westsiders for Strong Schools, a neighborhood group focused on promoting excellent public schools on the West Side. And in 2015, Rebecca Noecker made history by becoming the first woman elected to represent Ward 2 on the St. Paul City Council. Ooh, so you kind of started this trend here of all the St. Paul Council people being women.
I joined a couple of amazing women on the council at the time, and I'm so glad that now I have a bunch more. We have some amazing new colleagues.
And today we are here to talk about Yes for St. Paul families. This episode of So St. Paul is presented in partnership with Little Moments Count. Little Moments Count is a statewide collaborative that's focused on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and small moments of interaction like talking, playing, reading, and singing help create the pathways that build a child's brain during this early stage of life. And WFNU is excited to be partnering with Little Moments Count to host these conversations focused on early childhood development. And you can learn more about Little Moments Count or hear a recording of this episode at littlemomentscount.org. So, Rebecca, thank you for being here. Can you start by sharing a little bit about your background? And it sounds like you have a passion for educational equity. Like, what drives that?
Well, thanks for the question. Again, thanks so much for having me. I have always been really impressed and inspired by this idea that the world doesn't have to be the way that we found it, that people have made decisions before us that have resulted in the world that we see around us, whether it's a street design or a playground or a bike lane or a social system that doesn't work. And we can make different decisions and we can change the world around us. And so from a very young age, my family and my Jewish faith tradition inspired me to try to be part of that, try to be part of the change. And I've always been really motivated to work with young people. I started my career as a middle school science teacher in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I've been fortunate enough to have 2 children of my own. And it's so powerful to see how much development happens at a very early age and what a difference it can make when we get kids off to the right start. So when I ran for city council, I knew that I wanted to bring that focus on children to the council because there's so much that we do on the city council in the city that affects children's lives far beyond the school day.
Gotcha. That's working with middle schoolers. That is, you must have a lot of patience.
Hardest thing I've ever done.
Yes. So can you tell me more about Yes for St. Paul Families initiative and how you got involved?
Sure. So Yes for St. Paul Families is a campaign for a dedicated early learning fund in St. Paul. This is a really exciting idea to me because we know that the best investment we can make in our community is to invest in our littlest residents, our children ages birth to 5. And there's just so much opportunity when we get kids off to the right start at those ages. We know that most brain development happens at that time. We know that when kids are in quality early learning, they start school ready to learn. Their parents are able to get to work. Employers are able to count on a reliable workforce. And then now there's actually research, and it's amazing. There are very few public investments that have this kind of return on investment, this kind of data backing them up. We're now seeing that even the children of the children who are in quality early learning have better outcomes in health and education and their economy than kids who don't. So it's really a powerful investment that we can make. The problem is our society has it totally backward. We really don't invest in kids at the very beginning of their lives. We really leave parents on their own to figure out early learning and childcare. And Minnesota is one of the most expensive states in the country. We're the 6th most expensive state for childcare. So if you're listening right now and you're thinking, yeah, it's costing me, more than my rent, more than my mortgage to pay for childcare, you're not alone. That's something that everybody in our state and in our city struggles with. What we're trying to do in St. Paul is something unique in our state, but it's something 50 other cities across the country have done. They've basically said, we're going to lead on this issue. We're going to wrap our arms around our children and our families, and we're going to invest in them. We're not going to wait for the state or the federal government to do it. And we're going to create a dedicated fund to help families afford childcare. And that's what we're trying to do here in St. Paul.
That's great. Has any other cities in Minnesota done this initiative? We
would be the first in Minnesota, but one of 50 in the country. And I actually think that's a sweet spot. I like the idea of St. Paul leading the way on progressive social issues like this. But I also like being able to learn from successes and failures elsewhere. And so we're in that sweet spot with this program.
So the other cities who have these yes for whatever city they are, is this something that they have done in previous years, or is this everyone is doing this year? It's on the ballot for November.
That's a great question. They've done them in previous years, up to I think a decade or a couple of decades ago, and Washington D.C., San Antonio, Denver, Dayton, Ohio, New Orleans just a couple years ago. They many other cities too have programs like this. They're all a little bit different. They are tailored to be the kind of thing that their city needs, but yeah, there's a lot of different models, and they're all funded in slightly different ways. But they've really seen success, and so it's something that I think we need in St. Paul, and I think it's something our community in St. Paul really wants to support. We've seen that this issue gets really, really strong support when we talk to people about it, and we say, should we wrap our arms around our kids and support them at this age? People are willing to invest in that.
I just met a new parents the other day, and they have a 6-week-old, and the father is going back to work this week, and the wife can't afford to go back to work because the child care is so expensive. So it makes more sense for her to stay home. Why do you think it's such a high cost of child care in St. Paul, in Minnesota?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that we, there's a high cost to education in general. It's just that at some ages we publicly fund it. So, for example, we've all as a society said that we should all pay for everyone's education once children turn 5. And it's called kindergarten. But imagine if we told parents, we're not all going to pay for this as a society. You're going to have to pay for the teacher salaries, for the school building upkeep, for the transportation, the buses, the school lunches, right? It would be completely unaffordable if we were to do that too. So I think it's just that the costs are just as high for education at earlier years, but we don't have the public funding infrastructure to make it sustainable. And we hear, I've talked to hundreds of families over the last 7 years since I started working on this program, and everybody has a story like what you're describing. And sometimes parents, wanted to stay home, and sometimes they really didn't. And we also hear from providers, childcare providers, who will say, I have children who are getting some state subsidies because there is some financial assistance, but it's not nearly enough. There are hundreds of children on wait lists right now for that state support. And even if children are lucky enough to get a scholarship, often it only lasts about 7 months of the year. So we have providers who are part of our coalition who've said, I've had to tell Johnny that he can't come back to school tomorrow because his funding has run out. And of course, providers do everything they can to avoid having to do that. But it's heartbreaking to think that we just haven't put enough investment in, that a child has to literally leave his teacher, his friends, go home. His parents have to find other arrangements because we just can't find the funds to support it.
So this funding that Yes for St. Paul, the initiative, is looking to fund, is it for child care providers? Where does the funds go to?
Yeah, so the funds would follow families. So families who live in St. Paul who have children ages birth to 5 would be eligible to apply. And it's really important to us that parents be able to choose the setting that works best for their children, because we know that that parents know best, and that there are lots of different environments for early care and learning, and that parents should be able to choose which one works best for their child. So whether that is a specific cultural or linguistic provider, whether that's an in-home provider or a center, we want parents to be able to make that choice. So parents would choose the setting that worked best for them. Settings obviously would have to be licensed and need to meet basic safety standards. And then the dollars would follow the child to that provider. And all providers in St. Paul who are licensed would be welcome to be part of the program. We would also have staff that would be funded through this program that would help all families better access to childcare and find childcare, because one problem is funding it, a whole other problem is finding it.
Yeah.
And I know many families who, starting from conception, start looking for childcare because it's just so hard to find. Part of what we're hoping will happen with this program, and we've seen this happen in Minnesota in the past when funding has expanded for childcare, that will incentivize more childcare providers and centers to expand. Right now, they barely make enough to cover their costs, but if there's more funding coming in, we expect that more slots will open up, and that will benefit everybody in St. Paul.
Gotcha. And is this open to any family with children birth to 5? Are there certain income requirements?
We're going to be prioritizing families that make under 185% of poverty, which is more than half of the 0 to 5-year-olds in St. Paul.
Wow.
We know we won't have enough dollars to serve everybody, and so we know that it's important to start with those who are in the greatest need.
Gotcha. That sounds like, I was going to say, it makes me almost want to have another little one. Almost.
Yeah. I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I think we're good. But
Yeah.
yes, if a program like this had been around, it would have been really
I
really
would have
helpful.
liked that as well. Do you know, what's the process of developing this initiative? What were some of the biggest, challenges or milestones with Yes for St. Paul?
Yeah, so we've been working on this for about 7 years now, as I said, and I think part of the opportunity and the challenge in doing something like this is that it's new. So, people have been talking about this problem of childcare access for decades, but the approach has always been the same, which is to go to the state legislature and to ask for the state to expand its funding for these subsidy programs. And despite the best efforts of advocates and the legislators themselves, we just haven't seen the expansion of that funding at the levels necessary to meet the need. Even last year when we had a DFL trifecta and there was a lot of talk about expanding funding, there was some additional funding put in, but not nearly enough to cover the gaps. So the first part of the process was just exploring what it would look like to do this at the city level, which was a new concept. Looking at all of these other cities across the country, trying to figure out what their models were, what would work for St. Paul. We've engaged hundreds of people over the last 7 years, from childcare providers to parents, community leaders, research experts, economists. It's been really important to us to center parents and providers because we know this process has to work for them. The program has to meet their needs, and it's hard enough to be a child care provider or a parent with children at that age. So the last thing you need is more bureaucracy or more process put on top of you. So this has all been designed in partnership with the folks who are going to benefit from it the most. But we've had a number of different advisory groups and study groups and community engagement processes. The City Council created an early learning legislative advisory committee 2 years ago that came up with a series of recommendations for us. And we actually just concluded yet another financial analysis a couple weeks ago that gave us the full budget and exactly how the staffing would work. And so it's sort of been an evolution of getting more and more detailed as we go to be very clear about how the program will work and to let people know that this is something cities can do and to gain buy-in.
Are there any other big players in this besides yourself? Any other partners in St. Paul?
Oh yeah, there are a number of other organizations and individuals who have been supportive. The Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation is one that I just have to name. They have been incredibly supportive because efforts like this, especially at the beginning, they take funding. You need to be able to hire people who can do the research and who can do the engagement, and especially when you're starting with something that has never been done before, there isn't a structure to do that. So they've been incredibly generous. We have about 100 different individuals who've signed on to be public supporters. I'm very thrilled that board director of the St. Paul School Board, Hala Henderson, is the campaign chair woman. So she's our chair of our campaign effort. And I should say there's Yes for St. Paul Families is the campaign to tell people that this is going to be on their ballot on November 5th and to ask them to vote yes. But there's also a nonprofit effort that is supporting this work, that's educating people about the value of early learning. And then there's also work going on within City Hall to design the program. So there's kind of 3 different efforts all happening at the same time. And we've had lots of support for all 3 of those.
That's great that all those people are coming together. Sometimes I feel, especially working in nonprofits, you have a lot of different nonprofits that are kind of doing the same thing separately from one another. So it's really nice when there's a collaborative effort of people who have the same goal.
Yeah, it is. And this is an issue that tends to unite people. I think there's often, issues in our society, especially today, that are very divisive, very polarizing. I think this is one. And again, I've been talking to hundreds of people about this. All across the political spectrum, people in business, people in nonprofits, people in the public sector, people really get it. Because even, folks in the private sector who might normally be more skeptical about public programs like this, they see the immediate value of what happens when their workers don't have childcare and can't get to work. So business tends to get this. And then everyone knows someone who's affected by this issue, either themselves directly, their neighbors, their friends, their colleagues. So I think it's just that kind of issue that touches everyone's life, but we haven't to this point sort of looked around and realized, hey, you know what, this isn't just my problem. This is actually a systemic social failure that we can all come together, to your point, and do something about.
What do you guys see as the short-term and long-term effects if this is passed?
So short-term effects will be that low-income families in St. Paul will be able to afford childcare. Children will be able to move off of wait lists, where sometimes they are staying on wait lists until they turn 5 and go to kindergarten, and we've missed that whole window of opportunity. Their parents will then be able to work, and I can't overstate the importance of that. I was talking to Tony Sana with the Sana Foundation, and he was talking about how they run a workforce training program. But what they realized after the apprenticeship was done for the workforce training program was that many of their participants didn't end up taking the jobs that they were now qualified for because they didn't have childcare. And so Tony is actually building a childcare center to respond to that need, because he realized that that's essential. So the kids will benefit immediately by getting access to childcare. Parents will benefit immediately by being able to go to work. And then the providers, again, will have this reliable source of revenue, and that will hopefully encourage them to expand. They'll also have a source of support, because the staff in this program who will be helping parents find childcare and helping them also apply for other sources of funding. So these will be last dollar in, which I think is important. This will be a funding stream that will fill the gap after parents have applied for other sources of funding, say from the state. So that'll make sure that St. Paul families pull down all the dollars that we're eligible for that people might not know about. But those staff won't just help families apply. They'll also help providers, childcare providers, find out about all of these different resources and trainings that are available to them that they may not know about. And then in the long term, kids will be ready for kindergarten. That should support enrollment in our public schools, because we're going to have direct connections between neighborhood childcare centers and the public schools. It should support teachers having a kindergarten classroom where kids are all coming in at closer to the same level, which just helps the educational process going forward. And then again, in the long term, we see those benefits not only for those children as they grow up, but even for their children. And I think that's important as a city council member, too, because I am not just looking for what are the immediate solutions to the immediate problems in front of us right now. We have potholes that we have to fill, right? And we have homelessness, and we have addiction, and we have all of these social issues that we need to work on and address. But I also want to be doing things today that are going to fundamentally change where we're at 20 years from now, so that my successors aren't coming in and dealing with exactly the same problems because of actions we didn't take today. And that's why something like investing in early childhood really resonates with me, because it's clearly the kind of public investment that will change the way our society looks and feels and serves people for generations to come.
Gotcha. This initiative is on the ballot this November. So if it does pass, what is the first, the immediate steps?
Well, we've spoken to a number of other cities that have had ballot initiatives like this, and they've told us that the first instinct for everybody is to just celebrate success and be so excited that it passed and take a break from all the hard work, but that you shouldn't do that. That you need to immediately get started on planning, because the minute that the ballot passes, you want to be ready for your first year. So the way that our ballot initiative is structured is that it will grow over time. So there will be $2 million in the fund in the first year, and it'll grow by $2 million each year for 10 years. So it'll grow by $2 million, then $4 million, $6 million, up to $20 million. And that's it's an elegant way to scale, because it allows us to grow the program over time too, and sort of pilot in the initial years and then learn as we go, as we expand to serve more kids and as we have more dollars available. If, and I hope when, the ballot passes on November 5th, the city will immediately start to pull together an implementation team, and the goal would be to have a program ready for the first families by September of 2025. So we would be doing all of the nitty-gritty detail work of designing the application, hiring the staff, getting the word out, making sure families know about this, and getting providers to know about it as well.
How can residents of St. Paul get involved or support or find out more information about the initiative?
Absolutely. Well, we need everyone to be part of this conversation, so I'm really, really glad you asked that question. We need folks who are willing to roll up their sleeves and work on the campaign. We're going to be door knocking. We're going to be calling people. We're going to be at parks and at events throughout the summer, talking to people about why early learning is so important. So we need volunteers. Of course, we always need donations, because that's kind of how you keep all of your efforts going and how you make sure that you're paying your staff a living wage, which is also really important. And then, we need folks who are just willing to tell their stories. There are a lot of people out there, again, who have experienced the childcare shortage in a number of different ways. And we think it's important to tell that story from a variety of angles. I know that we'll be back here with different folks talking about this from their perspectives, and I'm really, really glad that you've given us this opportunity, because it's not just something that the City Council cares about. It's something that's affecting lots and lots of folks' lives. So stpaulfamilies.org, Saint spelled out, SAINT, paulfamilies.org is our website, and that's where folks can learn more and also sign up to get involved.
Great. Do you have a final message that you'd like to share with our listeners about the importance of the initiative, or even about yourself? Anything you want to share?
I'm excited for St. Paul to lead the way on really investing in our littlest residents. And I just know that St. Paul stands up for kids. I know this is the best investment we can make, and I hope people will get involved.
Great. Thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. I really appreciate your passion for this and your just enjoyment of St. Paul in general. And as Rebecca said, we will be having more guests on, possibly every other week or once a month leading up to the election, to talk about this initiative and the ways in which it affects them, and either from parents' perspectives or childcare providers, just different individuals that are really affected by this lack of affordable childcare in St. Paul. You can hear a recording of the show at littlemomentscount.org/podcasts. And if you'd like to learn more about Little Moments Count, you can visit their website at littlemomentscount.org. Again, this is So St. Paul, right here on WFNU LP 94.1 FM, Frogtown Community Radio. I am Katie DeSalle, and I will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of So St. Paul. Thanks again for joining us, Rebecca.
Thanks, Katie.
Shout out to all of y'all from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.